Hello, KFC Supercoaches. It is the Game Day podcast for round 4, big panel today with Rob Sutherland and Trent Copeland in for his season debut as well. Start with you, Rob. You can't give your normal answer, but what's the biggest issue with your team this week?
Well, it's not my team. It's right now. I think this is my first podcast with Supercoach royalty in Trent Copeland. I'm a little nervous, I have to admit. You know, it's I feel I'm in with the big dogs for once. That's why I avoided the Thursdays because I always felt that I couldn't quite, keep up to your guys' standard. But what the hell?
I think you've rocked out a new shirt for Copes as well.
I have, indeed. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this one's from the US. Yeah, Nordstrom collection.
Look at the strobing on it as well. I think it might have to be the first and last time it gets worn.
I know if it's going to cause trouble with the... I'll stop. My biggest issue this week is I'm doing what you shouldn't do. I'm getting rid of keepers. I'm selling Teddy and I'm selling Doueihi. That's my issue.
Copes, good to have you back on. What's the biggest issue with your team?
Yeah, great to be here. My team is an absolute shambles, so there's lots going on that I need to fix. And it starts with Doueihi as well. I'm going to have to get rid of him. I've got a couple of options on whether to get rid of him to a Nico Hines via Katoa, or do I go the probably more safe long-term structure option of a Munster or a Brown. And then the other one is I started without Turbo, and he's coming in this week, which I'm excited about.
Yep. For me, the biggest issue is who's the best cheapie this week? Because I need one. I was thinking it was Tyrell Sloan. Then I read the cheapie Bible yesterday, and I kind of got convinced by Jackson Ford. Even though I sold him last week, I'm considering bringing him back this week. What are your thoughts on Ford?
Yeah, look, I'm a wait and watch personally, and with a break-even of 22, I think you can afford to make sure that he's going to get the 80 minutes if you wanted to wait a week. I don't mind it as a purchase, and there's not many guys outside of Hopgood and Preston in the back row that are going to make a chunk of money, and he is one that could well do that. So I don't mind it. Outside of that, it's pretty slim pickings. Sony Luke, Tyrell Sloan, potentially. Yeah, I'm not convinced on either of those. Luke, to me, is someone that I'm looking at jumping on, mainly because I've got Tanner Boyd sitting outside my 17 at hooker, and I can make a bit of cash there without affecting my point scoring on field. Yeah,
I just want to see what's happening with Sonny Luke's minutes first. I think they will build up, but they did build up from round 1 to round 2, but there was also a concussion in there for Kenny as well, so I don't know how that might have affected things. So for me, Luke is a wait and see. Send your questions through, guys. We've got Copes manning YouTube. I'm manning Facebook Live. So send those through, guys. So now we're going to pimp your team. We'll go to you first. Copes.
I love this. Benny G. Rob has lost touch with the common man with that shirt.
I was never in touch with the common man. I was always a pretext.
Joe says at this rate we'll be out of trades by round 10. I'm with you there. I'm contemplating using my second boost in a couple of weeks.
So on that boost, I'm tossing up the cheapies. And Tyrell Sloan, I think, is a guy that I could get in if I used a boost. And I don't think he is the sort of guy that you use a boost for. You've got to have a pretty good reason to use that boost.
I think Sloan's a questionable trade and a definite no on the boost.
Yeah, I'm with you there. A question around the best buys for you trades-wise in centres, outside of Carraz, if you've already got someone like a Val Holmes and you've already jumped on a Carraz, who are you looking at as guys that are potential? Garrick is the obvious one that could be there for the long haul, but outside of that, are we just cheapies and guns, or are there some guys in that mid-range where people can jump on maybe in that 480 to 550k range?
The one I like is say Marzu, and potentially Momirovski if the immediate swap deal happens with the Roosters and the Knights. But both of those are wait and see what happens. What I like to do with centre wing is go as cheap as possible, get one gun to anchor it with, wait and see if another gun fires, get the second gun. Like, move it in that way rather than try to jump early.
I've got my one gun and then all cheapies from there because that is the spot where you make a lot of cash. The guy that I'm a little bit dirty about missing out on is Connolly Lemalu, who looks like he could be playing an 80-minute edge role at the Dolphins. Currently just centre wing only, but when we do our updates for round 6, he will earn dual status. So he could be one of these guys who's dual position, playing 80 minutes in the back row, but available at centre wing.
But on that, that's because Felice is out and Kenny's moving into the middle, Kenny Bromwich.
Yeah.
Like, when the team is as it should be, then he goes to the bench, right?
Well, Kenny's actually named in the middle this week and then goes out to the right edge, and Connolly has been named to start.
But when the team's where it should be, it's Felice and Kenny Bromwich 80.
Yes, but you've got Felice out for 4 weeks.
Sure.
So you should be able to make a fair bit of cash.
And the break-even's at a point where you could jump on even for 3 weeks, knowing that you're going to have a Kaufusi absence for 4 weeks with a bit of a buffer there. And his average is actually unders compared to what it should be, because when he's played his 2 full games, his average is around 65, 70. So there's definite upside there. Much tougher matchup this week, I think, than the edge players for the Dolphins have had in the last couple of weeks. So interesting. I'm interested, but I've got way too many other priorities to be jumping on there.
Evan is asking pros and cons between Munster and Hines. First of all, I actually think Dylan Brown is the best buy in that position, and that's who I'm going with. 5.5% ownership. His base and base attack is about 45. So he is probably the safest guy in that position. And is a point of difference. He's got a great buy schedule as well, so I'd have him ahead. What are your thoughts?
I agree. Out of those 3, I think Dylan Brown's well in front. Any non-Origin player, Eel, is just gold, right? Because they're going to play every single one of the buys. He's got a great base. If I'm going to pick between Munster and Hines, though, I think I've got Munster in front. Hines has got 2 games, then a bye, then some tough games. Munster, it's all going to come through him. He's got just a terrific base, terrific upside. If I'm going to pick one, it's Munster, but I prefer Brown.
I think all 3 are matchup proof as well, and Brown has shown that over the early rounds. They've been losing, playing very strong opposition, and he's still averaging 70 plus. So he's the kind of guy that I think if you buy him now, I think his break-even's around 40. If you get on now, you're going to own him largely until the end of the season. Yep. The other 2, I think you're going to have to be making decisions. Nico's bye in 2 weeks, coming back from a calf. Not a good one to come back from when you're an explosive athlete, and it can just go like that at any moment. Munster, to me, is the one that I'll be jumping on for safety of scores. I don't think his injury is likely to reoccur, whereas Nico's at 900 grand with 2 weeks until a bye. I'm tempted. He's very much in the frame for one of my trades this week, and I want to get. I've had some pretty low scores. I want to point a difference and potentially even captain him against the Dragons. But no. I'm going Munster. What do you mean no? You know how bad the Dragons are.
I know how bad the Dragons are. Leaked 4 tries in 9 minutes at the end of last week. I agree. Hines, you have to have a look at. I've ruled him out completely. Munster is a fair bit more expensive than Brown, and I don't quite have the cash. I will be really worried when he runs out against the Tigers at home after some massive sprays from Bellamy during the week, you would presume. So I will be worried watching that match, but I am, in the end, going with Dylan Brown. Price is a big issue.
Does it worry you that Hughes is out, either of you? Or do you think he is the one that provides Munster the freedom? Or do you think that him just having full free reign to take over the entire offence is an asset to someone like him?
I don't think it hurts him, honestly. Yeah, okay. The way Hughes plays is so different from the way Munster plays. I don't think that the defence can afford to focus on one or the other. And Pezzett wasn't that bad. Like, he showed some nice footwork, which is what Hughes does. With his running. Maybe Hughes out helps Warbrick if I'm going to find anything in SuperCoach. But he just doesn't like to pass it out to the guy. I don't know. Yeah.
Of course, a big blockbuster coming tonight. The Eels v the Panthers. Let's chat the burning issues. First things first, both teams look like they will be unchanged. We've spoken about Dylan Brown, but obviously we need to talk about Jermaine Hopgood, playing big minutes in the opening 2 weeks, dropped back to 54. It's still pretty solid minutes. He'll still make massive cash, but he's not a VC or a C this week, and I do see that he's a VC in 12% of teams, so I'd be changing that pretty quickly.
I think you've got a VC Cleary in this game, don't you? I don't want to jump ahead of the captain section, but that's the thing that jumps out in this game. The Panthers have been going pretty badly. They've had the week off. They're coming down into Parramatta's house where they'd really enjoy showing their local rivals up. I think Cleary's in for a big one. Hopgood I remember the show before we did it where people were captaining Hopgood, and I said, isn't it strange that this guy's gone from New South Wales Cup to being the next Corey Parker? Let's give him some time. I don't want to rehash my victories, but that was one. I suppose those are my big takeaways there.
What the other thing to factor in is that it wasn't until Doueihi went down with what looked like a potentially serious knee injury, and thankfully he's got away with that and he's going to play this week, but it wasn't until he went down that Hopgood came back on the field. He was hooked early, and it looked like a coaching decision. It was based on something that Brad Arthur wasn't happy with. So he was off, sat on the bench for what felt like 3 hours at that point. But he came back onto the field after Doueihi got injured. The real win here is that Ryan Madison returns on the right edge. He, I thought, was going to cut into Hopgood's minutes.
I think he still
rotation.
could. Yeah, he might do that Tohu style where he plays on an edge and then just comes into the middle.
They've got Doueihi on the bench, so presumably if there's no injuries, he would come on in that right edge position, which is where he's been playing, and then Madison goes to the middle. But look,
I'd be factoring in 55 minutes for Hopgood, not 80.
The other guy we need to talk about as well is, of course, Bryce Cartwright. So he has snuck under the radar. Well, I hate
what's a
talking about
SuperCoach show where we don't talk about Cardi?
I hate talking about him because I don't actually own him. I've gone off the Cardi party, but he's killing it, making mass cash. Do you think he plays 80 minutes in that left edge spot this week?
I think he could. Yeah, I think if they've got to play, one of them has got to play 80 minutes, and I think Cardi's the most likely one, with, as we say, with Maddo's shifting between the two.
I think you'll end up seeing, potentially Ryan Madison playing 70 minutes down the track, but straight away with no game time off the back of that suspension. I think he'll be a slow build. Cardi's he scored 50s in every game in full 80 minutes, and I'd expect to see the same sort of thing this week. Yeah. And, until Sean Lane returns, I don't see why that would change too much. The only problem might be is if Doueihi comes on for Cardi and Madison is the priority on the right edge. If that's what they're looking at. But look, it's a bit of an unknown. At this point, you're not jumping on him if you don't own, as in the Cardi party that is, but you're just sitting back and counting your cash if you do already have it.
100%. Let's move on to the Panthers. Cleary VC, I've got it locked in. For some reason, he's the 7th most sold player this week. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, he's got 160 break even.
Yeah, it's people panicking on the BE and wanting to get to Nico Hines. It's got to be.
I mean, it was last week. He had that BE last week and the bye. That was the week to sell.
But Hines wasn't available. There's a clear halfback option here to differentiate yourself. If you, say, had a slow Trent Copeland-like start to the season, you might want to be chasing some
1 minute he was nervous to be next to me. Now he's spraying me. I love it.
Now I'm in my comfort zone. I'm all right now.
Good.
This is the first time you two have been on a show together.
In the last, I'd imagine. Trent's got it in his contract.
Not allowed to be sledged. No, get your zingers in, by the way.
Yes, get your zingers
in. Coming from left and right here, but make sure you get them in.
Let's chat Taruva. So I think he obviously is an absolute must-have. He's scoring 40s in base. As soon as you get some big attacking stats, you're looking at some pretty serious scores. But is he in your 17 this week, Copes?
He's in my 17 this week, and I actually think he's a priority purchase if you don't own him. If you sold him because of the buy, if you didn't start with him, I think he's flying really under the radar this week as a purchase. I would have him the length of the straight ahead of Sloan. There is no comparison. This guy's work rate, it looked like Brian Toto. The last game that they played, 40 points in base, hasn't sniffed an attacking stat yet, and I'm thinking they're going to come on that juicy left edge for the Panthers. And as you say, a lot of people maybe have forgotten that basically the entire Panthers squad were at the World Cup and starting pre-season late. They've come back, they've had a bye, a slow start, yes, for their standards, but this is where they're going to start to find their groove, in my opinion. Guys that have come back a bit late and worked their way into a season, as opposed to a lot of other teams who have had a full pre-season together, all their cohesion's there. The Panthers, and Taruva in particular, I think are going to start hitting the ground in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Both left sides, the Eels and the Panthers, are missing their big hole-running second rower, right? So, with Lane out and Kikau at a different club, it's like that run-pass option that used to work for them so well is missing, to use an NFL comparison sort of thing. And in a way, that's hurting Taruva, but the more practice they have, I think the more they're going to get their groove there. I think he'll score sooner than later.
Let's take some questions, and please send your zingers through as well. If you do come up with a zinger, that's an awesome sledge that we think is funny. You'll get this pop up on the screen. It's one of the best prizes in SuperCoach. We've got from Moshi, who's asking, do I start Warbrick or the Hammer? Look, I think this is a good question. Based on what's happened this season, you absolutely go with the hammer. But I think that game, Dolphins v Broncos, will be very Origin-like and low-scoring. So maybe it's a low score from Hammer this week. And then you've got Warbrick coming up against the Tigers.
I've played Warbrick the last 2 weeks.
With Pezzett inside him. And if he's going to score a try, surely it's this week.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that last week. In almost 40 points against the Titans, Warbrick scores 15.
Yeah.
To me, it's too dire to be putting your neck on the line there.
Yeah.
And the
I'm
Hammer's
not playing
averaging
Warbrick,
70.
by the way, but I just guarantee this week he'll come out and kill it. Because when everyone
None of us are picking, which guarantees he scores a try this week.
And the Hammer's averaging 70. As much as it is a tough matchup, I think these are the sort of games where if the Dolphins are going to continue their great start, I actually think they might lift even more this week. This is where they're calling it the Battle of Brisbane. This is where they're going to make their money. Every year is this matchup, particularly when it's at Suncorp. So
is it the Battle of Brisbane or is it the River City Rumble? Peeperdell's copy seems to go between one and the other.
Whatever it is, it's missing its biggest weapon in Felice being out. I think that hurts the Dolphins so much. And that's why I think the Broncos are going to win as much as it pains me. I know we're not meant to be doing tips, but let's try to sit on that one.
Mark Andrews asking, is gamble too big of a gamble? It's a decent question. So he's in playing 5'8" with Ponga out indefinitely with that concussion. He looks likely, and he's just a wild character as well. I love watching him play.
He is, but there's no way I'm jumping on him in SuperCoach. No. And even like when you watch the Knights play, it just strikes me as a team that they could be a completely different team next week. How they play, who scores well. Marju is maybe one that I'm interested in just because of his base and how,
Marzu and Miller, because they'll go and do it themselves. Yeah. They'll just keep running and busting tackles.
Yeah.
They don't need a good half or a good forward base to establish it for them. There's no Knights I want.
Yeah.
We're getting asked by Michael, is Munster 100% starting? It's basically 95%. Mick Carianis filed this morning that he had the screw taken out of the finger. He just has to get through captain's run. So he's looking pretty good. I think you can lock in that trade tonight if you have to. And then, of course, they're playing the second game of the round, so you could wait until then too.
Yeah. I'm actually really keen on that. Talking through it before, I think Nico is maybe a distant third in my mind, and then it's between Brown and Munster to be making a look at. And without Hughes, I really like your take that he's just going to be involved in everything. Question here, actually, one other guy that I'm really interested in. Benny has just asked, what do you legends think of Tom Gilbert as a downgrade from Cotter?
That would be my boost trade if I was going to make it.
Okay.
I have Gilbert as like Tohu light. He does a lot of work. He can play edge and he can play middle. He's got a bit of an offload to him. He's got decent footwork. He tends to go over 8 metres every time he makes a hit up. My only fear is he's slightly flattering to deceive with that humongous base. The first couple of games, huge base, and it came back a bit in the third. And in the end, I decided it's not worth a boost to get to him. Instead, I'm kind of hoping that Tohu gets an HIA in the first 10 minutes and doesn't come back, or Tarpanay, at which point their price drops to being almost Gilbert price, and you can get him in there.
Exactly what we want.
Got some
Predicting
zingers.
HIAs.
Zingers coming through.
Should I have gone with a calf injury? Would that be better? But I don't want the explosive injury.
Yeah.
Tom looks like a big booger.
Big booger?
Yeah.
A hairy booger.
Big hairy booger. I like that. That gets a zinger for sure. What's with the 70s disco shirt, Rob?
I suppose the 70s was a good period. I was born. Mum and Dad were happy.
Should I captain a forward like Payne Haas or Tohu?
Harry Grant.
Or a spine guy like Turbo? Or I think Harry Grant's the most popular.
Yeah.
I mean, if you own Turbo, I find it difficult to go into a game where you're not captaining him. I don't really care who it's against.
The issue is with him, I always captain him when he's playing at Four Pines or Brookvale Oval, but this weekend they're at Accor, I think. So that changes it this week, I think.
To me, I couldn't care less where he's playing. I think he's just better than the rest.
So you're captaining it?
It'll be either him or Latrell. Okay. And Latrell's not high in the captaincy ranks at the moment either. But I think those two are the two, regardless of who they're playing against, can score, along with Nathan Cleary, can score 180 with ease.
I think Latrell has a really big game this week.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk Friday night footy, of course, brought to you by KFC. On the Friday night, we've got two big games, Storm v Tigers, and then the big blockbuster, the Battle of Brisbane, Dolphins v Broncos. In this Melbourne v Tigers game, I definitely think this is a game to target with Storm players. Fill your final 17 with Storm guys, and VC and C as well. I think they could put on 30, 40.
30-40 seems conservative to what we've seen some of the scoring so far this year. I reckon 40-50 if they're switched on. And if they are, then Harry Grant scores well. My only fear on Grant is Garlick sitting there on the bench now. So, if it's that classic, if the game's in the bag, they take him off at 65. But if they take him off at 65, he's probably scored 120. So
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this game? Are you going to target?
Yeah, look, I really like Munster as an addition to my team, and then Grant, obviously, I think if you don't own Grant, you have to break your team to get him in. I think he's the length of the straight against anyone else at the position. So getting him in now is important as well, because the closer you get to Origin time, you're going to want to maybe stay away or maybe trade to someone else. But look, I think he's a must-have and a captaincy option every week. Last week, in a loss, still scored over 100, 3 try assists. He finds ways to score regardless.
Another big question for this game is Christian Welsh a sell? Now, we spoke about it a fair bit in the office. That was probably an outlier last week. At 3 p.m. on the Gold Coast, it was hot and the minutes were all over the place. Before that, Welsh was playing pretty good minutes. In any case, I was hoping he'd make some money. He's only made 2K, so he is out for me for Jackson Ford. That frees up the money for Dylan Brown.
It was a sweaty mess, that game. So I'm forgiving Christian Welch. As a fat man, I don't like the heat. And I'm not saying Christian's fat, but he's large. And he struggles in the hot weather. So
clip that one up.
He's a Harvard graduate. He can be what he wants. So, look, I'm just going to forgive that game. I'm going to go back to round one. He's a 45 base guy and he's a great offloader. So I think he's still good at the price.
I was playing cricket on the weekend. It was albeit in Sydney, and it was very, very hot. I mean, my captain at St George, Nick Stapleton, he'd be watching this. He was an absolute myth on the weekend in that heat. He basically just wilted away. Christian Welch and David Fafita, I think, is in this boat as well. Two guys that you can probably give a pass. As much as it was disappointing to watch low scores, the whole forward packs were just on their feet.
The only people who looked less comfortable was Blocker in a sweat, like in a jacket. I reckon they had that jacket just to cover things up, because Block's he lost 5 kilos in the broadcast.
Moving on to the Dolphins v Bronx, I think that the Battle of Brisbane will be pretty tight. It'll be kind of Origin-like. So does this turn people off Reece Walsh, for example, who, let's face it, was on 35 points with 10 minutes to go against the Dragons? Having said that, I'd probably buy him if I didn't have to sell Doueihi, and I think Doueihi is a sell. So basically, I'm death riding Reece Walsh.
I think he was on 5 points or 6 points after about 50 minutes.
Right. Okay.
So
he was on 0 at half time, I think, or give or take. Yeah, it's amazing.
Look, I don't mind it actually as a 2-week play. If you own Tedesco right now, I actually don't mind it as a get on for a couple of weeks and go back to Teddy or back to whoever you prioritise for the Origin run. But I wouldn't be jumping on if you already own Turbo and Latrell or someone like that you're really locked in on as great options moving forward. But look, I can see the merit. He's got a great average. He's going to make a lot of cash, but he's not for me.
I think his next 18 games are at Suncorp, which is a tremendous advantage, and the Broncos do travel well. Yeah, but in the end, Walsh is a gamble I'm not prepared to take. I'm going to go for a safety like Garrick, and it's a fair bit more cash. I'm not comparing apples and apples, but I do think this is the game where he goes 35, and a lot of people who hopped on thinking he was rock solid are going to be disappointed.
Thoughts on Carrigan and Haas? I feel like this sort of game is made for those two. Haas and Carrigan are already very popular, but Haas is the third most purchased player this week, and I could not talk anyone out of it.
He's looked so good. Yeah. This is, long in the distance, in the rearview mirror is the dramas around contracts and things like that. He looks motivated. They look like a well-oiled machine, particularly in the forward pack, as they did really to start last year. They look like a team in the early phase of the year that could be a top 8 team, and certainly with the healthy Reece Walsh, healthy Adam Reynolds, they're looking electric. So I wouldn't put it past him being the number one at the position yet again this year. And jumping off a Welsh before he loses money or selling a Ruben Cotter who's out injured, going to Haas is a great option, I think.
Yeah, look, I think Haas is the best front row in the game, and there's every reason to get him, and every reason I won't, because I keep doing stupid things. So instead, I'll chase Tarpanay or Tohu, and I'll find every reason to go someone other than just the rolled gold gun.
You're holding Cotter as well, aren't you?
Well, only because I don't want to use a boost, right? And he's not going to lose me any money. So next week, I'll get him after... I can't say injuries anymore. After Tohu gets hooked at the 10-minute mark, just because he offended the coaches.
Well, speaking of injuries and HIAs, let's talk late mail. All right, we'll whiz through this pretty quickly, but Munster is a near certainty to play, so you can lock him in if you're selling Doueihi to Munster. Pezzett, of course, comes in at halfback for Jerome Hughes, who went to the judiciary and got 2 weeks. So Pezzett probably doesn't become a cheapie. Realistically, he needs Hughes or Munster out long term, but he was really good on debut, and he's definitely a guy to watch this week.
Very impressive. But it's amazing that he stays at the club too. And this kid's been talked up as the next young half, and he's signed on to stay longer at the Storm. So obviously he's enjoying being in the best young nursery in the game, sort of thing. But no, not a SuperCoach option for mine.
I think he's the one that you keep an eye on, keep on your watch list for any sort of serious injury to a Munster or a Hughes, and then that's the time where you jump.
Or if you know that Munster's going to get rested, for example, over Origin, you can bring him in for a 2-week hit.
Yeah, exactly right.
But how about all the cheapies at half and 5/8 coming up? Next week, you could have Jonah Pezzett due for a massive price rise, Wakeham and Schuster all ready for 50, 60, 70k each, all of them in a week. Yeah,
well, I think that I want to just flag something on Schuster. And I don't know if you guys watched that game last week, but he was electric. In attack, he looked like the superstar that we saw playing on the left edge for the Seagulls a couple of years ago. But he would have scored 11 points if he didn't have 3 try assists in that game. So, yes, he played out of his skin really well. I was really impressed. I'm one of his biggest fans. But he had one run that registered for points. He made 10 or 11 tackles, missed a couple of those. If he doesn't have the huge attacking stats this week, I think it could be a nosedive in terms of money-making prospects. So now that he's in the 6 jersey as opposed to the 11, I think we might see a little bit more passing before the line creativity, which hopefully leads to more attacking stats. But it's a bit alarming to me that people are jumping this week or have even already got on last week for his first game, A, because of health, but B, because I don't think the base is going to be there where it was when he was playing on an edge. So it's just a couple of flags. Don't think he's just the absolute locked-in certainty to A, buy now, and B, playing the 17 every week.
He looked absolutely busted a couple of times on the weekend as well. He was gassed and he was cramping up. I thought he was out. I thought he was done. But it just was cramp, thankfully. But I agree. Definitely take a look at Munster, at Schuster this week.
Is the counter-argument to that, and just be a contrarian, because it's my style, is that what he showed was that the skill is there, right? And that he had the skill fully on display, and the fitness will come back. You know, his question is always maybe the fitness levels were always in doubt. Apparently he had a big pre-season. They showed him running up a hill. He looked really good. He'd lost lots of weight.
Desi Hasler was chasing him around in a car as well. And I don't know what happened after Desi left.
But, he does his calf and he loses a little bit of that. And it was really hot as well. So, you could maybe argue that the base will come back 10, 15 points. And if he keeps all the skill, then he's tremendous. But I 100% agree. Wait a week. But this one's big.
Yeah, I'm excited. And, don't let me say wait and watch for a week as a deterrent for buying him in the long run. I'm totally with you. Yeah. And I think I'm as excited about him as any other cheapie this year, put it that way. So, look, I think I'd be prioritising other people to bring in this week, knowing that they're going to make money and not re-ping a calf or have that low score.
Yeah. Also in late mail, we got Kafusi out 4 weeks. Obviously, that means Kenny Bromwich goes to the edge. Adam Doueihi, we've kind of skimmed over this. We've all said that we're selling him. Let's go a little bit deeper. So he has turf toe. That means that he didn't train last week until captain's run and then took the field and got 28 points, I think it was. He's also switching to fullback. So there's some question marks there. And it looks like he won't train until captain's run this week as well. So you add all that up, and for me, particularly with Dane Laurie on the bench as well, so he could cut into his minutes. So you add all that up and he's a definite sell.
When you say cut into his minutes, I don't think he's far too good to be on the bench. So it may cut into his fullback minutes, but there is no stage where he's fully healthy that he is being taken off the field by choice, in my opinion. I think he would move into the halves and Wakeham would come from the field, would be my take. I mean, I started with Munster. Munster gets injured and I was like, Doueihi had an amazing start. I was a bit contrarian and got off him at the start, and then I jumped on and have got two of the worst performances you will ever see, and now I'm going to sell as well.
In that case, could you buy Munster? Because I'm buying Brown.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely me that's breaking them. But yeah, look, I don't really mind if he takes the field or not this week. I'm off. I think I'm moving to someone else.
Throw in disharmony in that back line. It all looked out of sync. You know, even he threw a dog of a pass to Bateman and Bateman baked him. You know, it's clearly there's issues all over the place in that team. And I thought the Tigers were going to go better this year and they're not. So lots of reasons to get away.
Chance, Nickel Clockstad, the two Warriors, Nickel Clockstad and Jackson Ford, both look like they will play. That's good news. Chance is in my 17, and I'm tossing up whether to throw Ford in there as well. CNK in his 17 this week.
He's in my 13.
Yeah,
100%. Just go to the first game and have a look at what he did. Work rate was great. Busted tackles, threw offloads. I think he scored a try. Everything you want. I go back to like 4 years ago. He was one of the premier fullbacks in the competition. Then he upset Ricky, and he just got wasted, right? And now he's back where he should be, back at fullback, back playing like he should at the Warriors. I think he's great.
And they actually look like they've got some nice cohesion. Sean Johnson looks like he's enjoying his footy. Tamari Martin looks handy, and I think, you know, at their best, I think they can put up points. Will they win? Maybe not, but I think they're going to be a team that puts up points every week. And with his work rate and base, with all of these other, you know, are you picking C&K or Hammer for your team? If it's me, I'm picking C&K.
Yeah.
Also, we got Isaiah Katoa, the cheapie from Dolphins. He's got captain's run today, so we will know by the time the game starts tonight whether he's in or not. It doesn't really affect your 17s this week because he shouldn't be in your 17, but it will affect your price rises. And Nico Hines looks like he's set to play. The other issue they've got there is that Braden Trindle, who goes to the bench to accommodate Nico coming back, is in doubt with an ankle injury. He's got that break-even of minus 39. So if he's injured, we might not get a final price rise for him before he gets moved to Schuster, for example.
Yeah, well, he is one that I'd want to hold for a couple of weeks just to make sure that Nico doesn't have a reoccurrence of that calf injury. And the reason I say that is because if you jumped on, you've got $100,000 already in the kitty, which I wasn't game enough to do. I went other places. But I don't mind holding him past the bye and just making sure that Nico's okay, because with that minus 39, even if he was to play off the bench this week and get a low score, if there's a recurrence of the injury, you're looking at a guy who can average 65 in your starting team that you've got at base price. So I really like the hold there and wait and see.
There are good cheapie halves, but playing the long game as well. I mean, Hines is just an awesome number 14 or even at worst 18 in Origin. I can see him making the squad and therefore missing, you know, over the buys. And Trindle comes in. If you'd held him, you suddenly get your extra, you know, 100K, which makes all the difference in the middle of the year.
Yep.
Right, that's it for late mail, but let's talk guilty pleasures. This is the player that you shouldn't own, but the heart's just telling you to get. For me, it's Connolly Lemalu this week. I'm devastated that I don't have him in my team. I think he continues, or doesn't continue, but should be playing 80 minutes at the Dolphins most weeks on that edge, and will have dual position pretty soon. So he's a guy that I really want to get in, but just don't want to use my trade boost to do it.
What about you, Rob?
Look, it's Christian Welch. He's
you called him fat before.
Exactly.
He's a guilty pleasure.
He's a Storm player, so I don't like him. He's a Queenslander, so I don't like him. But, you know, he's erudite. I like that. He's not ashamed to display that he's got a little bit of learning and he's got opinions and he shares them. I like that too. He's one of the rare people on Twitter that actually brings value to that just shambles of a site that I can't keep myself off. So there's lots of reasons about Christian Welch that I don't like, and there's lots of things I do like. I feel guilty when I cheer for a Storm player. And a Queenslander as well. I don't know, there's lots of things.
That is a true guilty pleasure. You actually feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
Yours, Copes?
Mine is more a scenario than a player in particular. My guilty pleasure this week would be to sell Brimson, Doueihi, and also my planned trade of bringing in Turbo.
Yeah.
And I would be bringing in Munster, Brown, and Turbo at once.
That's huge.
There's a lot of money in the kitty already from last week, but that would be
a lot of keepers sold to bring in a lot of keepers.
Yeah. But I think, and that would set me up, I think, to go through Origin as opposed to doing little stepping stones all the way. So, look, the other one I'd really love to own is Ruben Garrick. I don't own him at the moment, but I think he is just so good, particularly when there's a healthy Turbo.
I mean, I could get around owning Schuster, Turbo, and Garrick. That combination is just electric. And look, every game they should be getting some attacking stats. Is Wade going to sell? That's from Aaron. I think he is. He's made almost 100k, and if you can get him up to Harry Grant, just do it.
If it's to go to Harry Grant, sure. But if it's to go to Reed Marnie, no.
Yeah.
I'd say hold in that case.
Sonny Luke, I probably wouldn't do it.
No. There's more money to be made there, probably as much as Sonny Luke's going to make.
I wouldn't be doing it.
Right, let's talk cheapies now. Cheapie of the week. So, Jacob Preston, very popular this week. Let's face it, if you didn't get on last week, you're kidding yourself. But if you did miss out, you just simply have to get him in this week.
Yeah. He's only owned in 31% of teams, which I was shocked at when I was writing the Cheapie Bible this week. Look, he's an 80-minute guy. I think he is as solidified as when I started Hopgood on my field as my second rower at the start of the year. I feel as confident if I was to sell a David Fafita this week, because he's got the bye next week and a high break even. If I was selling to Preston and had to start him on field, I'd be pretty comfortable with that. And I think the Dogs have got enough attacking upside in them now that he's going to get 55 in a bad week, and it could well be an 85-90 in a really good scenario, much like just Josh Jackson as he's been compared to. So, yeah, I'm excited about him, and I think he's going to be right there with Hopgood come the end of the year as the Cheapie of the year.
I agree. He's the only guy on this list I would boost to get if I didn't have him.
Yep, fair enough. So Jackson Ford we got next. I'm bringing him in, even though I sold him last week. I'm still happy to bring him back because last week when I sold him, it meant that I could get Eli Katoa and Tohu Harris. You convinced me today. I wasn't even considering him. And then I read the Cheapie Bible written by Trent Copeland, and it convinced me to get Jackson Ford. I think he is the Cheapie of the week, ahead of Tyrell Sloan. And, of course, Schuster, you should be waiting until next week.
Not against it, Tommy, but no fears of when Barnett comes in.
Well, Barnett's injured this week.
I know, but when Barnett comes back next week, and I know he plays prop, but it frees up a guy to move middle, and then you got Josh Curran sitting there on the bench, or in the reserves for whatever reason. Yeah, like all the way down.
Who I'm worried about.
There's a lot of those guys. I've got Ford, and I'm happy to get him, but I don't think I'd go in and out to get him.
No, I'm going to do it. All right. Frees up money.
Get Lemieux Alou. Get that guy.
So if he had your position now, I'd do it, but I can't do it given that he's centre wing.
You can get that added.
I can get one.
You can.
By the way, that is round 6. Yeah. That's going to happen in round 6, so we'll have a list coming out pretty shortly.
Unless Tommy needs it early, then.
We should do it. Let's do it now. Shaq Mitchell has gone for 8 weeks, unfortunately, and obviously Wakeham and Schuster are guys to watch out for next week. We have Trent Copeland in the studio, so we can actually throw to this sting now, and it makes sense. Cope's captains.
That handsome devil.
Thank God we got rid of the one with the cat and the
yeah, exactly. So we've got the stats there. I'll point out that these stats are from the top 10% of teams. You can sort by that in SuperCoach Plus this year, which is a great little addition to SC Plus. What are your thoughts on the captains this week?
Well, I mentioned a little earlier that there's 3 guys that I think can go 180 any given week. And they're the guys you really want with the VC and certainly in the right matchup, the straight C. To me, it is Latrell Mitchell, Turbo, and Nathan Cleary. Cleary plays in the first game of the round. So I think it's a no-brainer, particularly with a lot of teams owning players like Sam Walker on the bye, Cotter out injured. There are loophole opportunities there. So I think it's worth playing that as, rather than a straight C, playing the VC early on Cleary. And look, 44% of teams are going with Harry Grant on the back of his 100 last week, and clearly being one of the best players in the game. I wouldn't begrudge anyone for doing that. The one maybe smoky to look out for is, and he hasn't had an amazing start, averaging 59 so far, but it's Val Holmes up against the Titans playing at home. I think he might find some attacking stats this week. And if he does, it won't be a 60, it'll be 100 plus.
Yep, I kind of like that call. It's risky. For me, I'm tossing up between Grant and Turbo. I like Turbo when he's playing at home. He's not at home this week. Grant up against the Tigers and in a home game, plus Bellamy. Bellamy just would have absolutely torn them up this week at training. It's going to be very hard for me not to put the C on him and the VC on Cleary.
I'd say it every week, playing low-stress SuperCoach this year. Low-stress SuperCoach is VC, Cleary and C Grant, and out you go, and I'm done by the weekend, and I'm happy.
What about just one smoky, maybe the teams that are, if you find yourself behind going into the late Saturday games, Jacob Carraz I really like as well, as a particularly if your opposition doesn't own him, and then if you really like the matchup at Mount Smart Stadium, he's been unreal. I think a 55-60 is your worst case. And then if he scores, like we saw a couple of weeks ago, it was 120, 140. Yeah. So I actually really like him as a play the matchups. And if you're behind and you're an underdog, going somewhere like that can get you over the line.
He's a guy, if your opponent has it, you're a bit scared of. If you're heading your head-to-heads.
Yeah.
Let's go questions to the end of the show, guys. If you bring in Nico this week, you'll be left behind and may as well just hang it up for the year. That's from Harrison.
Wow.
Strong. I definitely want to have a look at Nico first.
Big call, given that he was the best player in the game last year. But
and killed it in both the All-Stars and his try.
Yeah, he looked good. Jonathan is asking, thoughts on Teague Wilton now that Hines is back? He's been good without Hines.
Yeah.
And look, I wouldn't be going out of my way to get him, but well done to the people who got on from the start of the year.
His base was very, very good last week. I think it was 50 plus in base. It hasn't been bad in the other 2 weeks. He's been really good. One I missed. It is what it is. But I wouldn't be going this week. I think he went up 60k or something last week, and that's a lot of money.
Actually, same guy, Jonathan, has written another question, and he's saying he wants to sell Cameron Murray to Teague Wilton. Would you be pulling that trade?
Not personally. A lot of people are disappointed in Cam Murray. Okay, yeah, he's averaging 60, and we're expecting maybe 75, 80, but I think he's still significantly better than Teague Wilton in the long term. And I think there's other avenues to getting someone like Wilton if you really, really wanted him. And create cash through other avenues, not necessarily guns.
I almost raged about it and sold Murray going into, and I hate having a Rabbitoh playing against the Roosters, but then I had a look at his numbers and just sort of calmed the farm a little. Like, he'll go 60 and 60, and then he scores a couple of tries, and it's 100, 2 games. Yeah. Like, Cam Murray is a guy you buy and keep, and over the course of the season, he'll finish top 4 position.
Yeah, lock away. What about, here's one from Alex, is Sam Walker a sell or a hold?
I think with the buy that he is a sell.
If I was going to Cleary, 100% sell. If I was going to Hines, not so much. But the Roosters do have tough games after the bye. I think, It's Eels and someone tough again. Maybe the Storm, the top of their head. What
about, a lot of people have Katoa in the halves and adds flexibility around, so you say yes to Cleary. Would it be yes to a Brown or Munster as well?
Oh, if I could go to those,
yeah. Interesting question here around Preston. If TPJ, this is from Mark, good question here. If TPJ comes back in the middle rotation, does Faitala Mariner go back to an edge and Preston then to the bench?
Look, I missed that. It's potential, but I still think you've got to respect how well he's playing. And I think the coach would still give him 60 minutes, which is still enough to make money. Look, if that happens and he's no longer the guy we're going to keep all year and go, I'll get him for nothing. But he is a guy at 450k, we move on to someone else. So ride it till it happens.
Yep.
Kane Anderson has written in. Now, Kane wrote us a few stories at the start of the year, so shout out to him. He says, Walsh scares me too much, going Garrick this week instead.
Hey,
Turbo Garrick stack is too good.
Yeah.
So we've got some agreements here.
The Turbo Garrick stack is exciting. I mean, you're going into every home game just like swanning through the gates, at Brookie, knowing that you're locking in, but at worst an 80 from both of those blokes. I couldn't care less who they play against either.
Plus they've done a buy, so you are paying big money, but you've got a buy out of the way too.
Right, well, that is it for our Game Day podcast, round 4. It was good fun with Rob Sutherland. Big thanks to Trent Copeland as well. We'll catch you next week.